Hi folks, and thanks for joining me today for our first ever battle report. But before we get into the action, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's subscribed to the channel so far. We've not been going very long, but I'm pleased to say we're already picking up subscribers. And thanks also for all the positive feedback that has come through. Some of that has been here on the YouTube channel, and of course I'll answer those comments in the relevant playlists, and some has been from people at the club and one or two other places as well. So thanks for that, very much appreciated. And if this is your first visit to Dragon's Teeth, then please do press like, share and subscribe. It will really help us to make the channel grow. So today we're talking about zombies. Now, who doesn't love a good zombie film? I imagine the first, certainly in the modern genre, was George A. Romero with Night of the Living Dead in 1968. And that was followed up, well, quite a while later actually, about 10 years later, with one of my favourite ever films, Dawn of the Dead, which works on so many levels. And Romero was responsible for spawning this whole genre of films, really. I mean, since then we've had quite a list. Return of the Living Dead, Shaun of the Dead, World War Z, or Z if you're English, the 28 Days, 28 Weeks Later films, Cockneys versus Zombies, Zombieland, and as well as films, there's been TV shows as well. The Walking Dead, probably the most prime and successful example. Although personally, I stuck with that for maybe about 3 series or so, and then sort of dropped out of it a little bit. There was also, I think it was in 2019, a very good British series that just ran for 1 season, and that was called Zomboat, and that was set on the Birmingham canals after a zombie outbreak. Very funny. And actually, when you look at it, it seems that the majority, or at least quite a large number of zombie films, are actually comedies as well, zomcoms. I'm not sure what that says about us, but to my mind, humour and horror are always very closely linked. Zombies are also very prevalent in gaming, particularly video games. We can go all the way back to things like Wolfenstein, Alone in the Dark, all the way up to more modern games such as Dead Island, and it seems like there's a ton of first-person shooter zombie games out. When it comes to tabletop games, then of course we'll tend to see zombies in fantasy or horror games. In terms of tabletop, you'll get them in different types of fantasy army, and I think, well, even Lord of the Rings had the Army of the Dead, right? Made a big difference in the Siege of Minas Tirith. I'm not sure if they qualify as zombies particularly, maybe more ghosts or spectres, but they were certainly dead and they were certainly walking, so that's good enough in my book. And of course we get zombies in RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons in particular, and every now and again in Call of Cthulhu. So my local club, Bedford Gladiators, meet every Monday night, and as I mentioned before, once a month on a Sunday we have a full day session. Last Sunday Luke and Rachel said they were going to bring down a game called Zombicide. Now, I'd not heard of this before, didn't know anything about it, but the name sounded intriguing, so I signed up to give it a try. I've since learnt that this was published by Guillotine Games, and I think I'm right in saying the first edition came out about 10 years ago, and then earlier this year it was sort of rebooted and kick-started, given some upgrades, given a bit of a makeover and released, along with a lot of subsequent supplements. I believe that those supplements or expansion packs not only give you extra rules, but also give you different settings as well. So I think there's a science fiction setting, a fantasy setting, even a Marvel Universe setting as well. Anyway, it all sounded very intriguing, so last Sunday 6 of us sat down to play Zombicide, and this is how it went. Oh, and just before you watch this, you might want to just check that the back door is definitely locked. Let's start with the board then. As you can see, the board is made up of several tiles, and each tile is designed so it will join up with every other tile, whichever way you place them. And these tiles are also double-sided. and they depict streets, buildings, and so on. And of course, the fact that you can change them around gives you scope for a lot of different layouts and lots of different scenarios. Each player chooses a single character, and of course each character has different capabilities, different specialities. I chose the construction worker Derek because we learnt in the Peter Jackson film Bad Taste, Derricks don't run. Everyone starts on 0 experience, you can see on this little row across the top here. More about that later on. And then some starting equipment is dished out, and this may vary according to the scenario. But basically everyone gets one item, which is usually a weapon. If you're unlucky, you get the frying pan, you might get a crowbar or a fire axe, or if you're really lucky, you get some sort of firearm to start. So once the equipment is dished out, the figures are placed on the board in the appropriate starting place. The aim for this mission was to collect certain items, things like water, rice and so on, which are placed around the board marked by these X counters. Once all those were collected, then you have to get off the board at the specific exit point. And of course, true to life, these items aren't all in one place, they're spread around the board. So the first decision for the group, because this is a group play, it's a cooperative game, is do we split up and go in different directions and collect one thing each, or do we stick together? So right from the get-go, we've got these very nice typical horror theme ideas of do we stick together or do we split up, which is going to be best. Now around the edge of the board we have these spawn points, and again these will vary according to the scenario. So every turn a player picks a card, one for each point, and that card tells us how many zombies will spawn there. That could be 0, or it could be a couple, and as you will see there are different types of zombie as well. So we've got your stock basic walker, who only moves 1 square, half the speed of the players. We have runners who move 2 squares, same speed as the players. We get these bigger zombies who take more damage to kill. And every now and again we get this huge thing that I think is called the Abomination, so we nicknamed him Tank. Very hard to kill, but luckily quite slow. So I mentioned the experience points earlier, this bar across the top of the character sheet. So every time you kill a walker, for example, you get 1 experience point. And as you can see, the colour changes as we go up. Now there's a very nice mechanic here, whereas as soon as someone gets into the next experience level, then you look at that appropriate colour on the spawn card. So low down on the blue here, for example, there's quite a good chance of getting 0 zombies, or maybe 1 or 2. As you go up into the next experience levels, the number of spawning zombies will increase. So that makes for a really nice balance between the players becoming more powerful and the number of zombies appearing. And we found that really keeps the tension levels up quite high. So as I just mentioned, the players move 2 zones or 2 squares. Most of the zombies, the walkers, move 1. And movement is 1 action. Each player each turn starts with 2 actions. You can increase those through going up in experience, or some players get an extra action as a bonus advantage at the start. And those 2 actions can include something like move a square, smash down a door, or move a square, pick something up. You can also spend an action searching a room, looting a room to find different things, generally weapons, but there is the opportunity of also finding a zombie as well. I always imagine that like you open a cupboard and the zombie kind of jumps out from inside. Again, all good horror film jump scare moments. And speaking of weapons, we have a range of melee weapons, crowbar, baseball bat, that frying pan I mentioned earlier, or machetes, all the way up to pistols, shotguns, sawn-off shotguns, submachine guns, and everyone's favourite, the flamethrower. So when you have one of these weapons, you have the card for it, and that gives you your damage, your roll to hit, your range, and so on. So most times you need to roll a dice to see if you hit. If you hit a zombie, one of the walkers, they only take 1 point, so they're quite easy to kill. But as I mentioned, with the larger zombies, and particular the tank, you need to do 3 or 4 points of damage in one hit. This is why we like the flamethrower, because that automatically destroys every zombie in that whole square. But of course, there's only one flamethrower on the board, perhaps, and you also have to have the can of gasoline to use it as well. So there's two things that you have to find. Another nice mechanic here was whenever you use a gun, or if you're doing something like smashing down the door, you put down a little noise token. And of course, zombies are attracted by noise, so they will head for the nearest noise. And this did lead to some nice tactics with the team. For example, once we had the flamethrower and the gasoline in the last scenario, we had one player making a lot of noise, attracted a huge amount of zombies into one square, and then the other player popped up and blasted them with the flamethrower. So I think one of the strengths of this game is that team aspect. We found that worked really well. Of course, if you end up in the same square as a zombie at a certain time during the movement, then you will get bitten and you will take at least 1 point of damage. Now that might not sound like much, but you only have 3 points to start with. So this is somewhat akin to the Call of Cthulhu. It's not like Dungeons and Dragons where you have 150 hit points. I think my current character in Call of Cthulhu has 12, and in this game you've got 3. So you really do have to work to keep away from the zombies. Yes, and something else you have to watch out for is friendly fire as well. Because, of course, at times you might be involved, let's put it that way, with a crowd of zombies, and your colleagues will start shooting them. But if you're in amongst them and they miss the zombies, there's a good chance they might hit you. And I think it was in the first scenario we actually lost 2 players due to friendly fire. So there's something else to worry about. We got in 3 scenarios during our playing time, which was about 4 hours, I think. So the first scenario took maybe a couple of hours, though we were learning the rules as we went along. The first scenario was really difficult. We basically got overwhelmed. The second scenario we tried was much quicker. That was a basic get off the board as quick as you can, and we managed to do that fairly easily. And the third scenario was where you had to get up to the top level in experience points as quickly as possible. And as soon as someone got to that top level, the game was over. So that was more of a sort of zombie hunt in a way. And we also had the use of cars in that as well. Cars are included in this, which instantly gave me a great idea for a mashup with this and Car Wars, which is something that maybe I'll look at in the future. The game comes with several scenarios, and as I've said, you've got this board which will give you quite a lot of permutations for different layouts. And I'm sure there are expansion sets as well, which will give you other layouts, other scenarios, and no doubt additions to the rules. Luke and Rachel told us that they'd played through the game a few times at home and suggested a few rules tweaks that we incorporated as well. Again, that's quite normal for games, right? Everyone tweaks the rules a little bit to suit their own style of gameplay. So overall, a very enjoyable game, really easy to set up. Luke and Rachel took us through the rules. We were playing it within sort of, 15-20 minutes. It was a very clear turn sequence. Everything was understandable. And to me, it captured that sort of Dawn of the Dead feeling very well. Because at the start, when there's just a couple of zombies coming on, you think, oh, this is quite easy. We're sort of wandering around. We found a gun. We're shooting the zombies from quite a distance away. But of course, as you progress and more start coming on, the tension really does ratchet up. And as I said, one thing I liked with this was that cooperative aspect. In that respect, it was a little bit more like a role-playing game, Everyone has to work together. And I think there's scope in this. I think there's something in the rules as well where you can put together a few scenarios to make your own mini campaigns as well. And I certainly saw aspects of this that I could use in tabletop gaming. This could be easily adapted to a sort of zombie figures game on a table with different roles and different missions for the players. So that might be something I'll look at incorporating into my fantasy skirmish rules as well. I think your basic pack for this, or your basic box I should say, it's rather a large box, retails for about 90 quid, which might seem quite a lot, but it is really packed with stuff. You've got your boards and layout, You've got your cards, you've got your counters, and you've got a lot of figures as well. I guess you could add in your own figures if you wanted, but these plastic figures are really nice. The zombies in particular have a lot of nice detail on them. They're very characterful. I would imagine the expansion packs go for a little bit cheaper. And again, that's going to give you a lot of variation in your scenarios, in your layouts, and so on. So yes, overall, really enjoyed playing this. Fun way to spend a few hours on a Sunday afternoon. And I look forward to playing it again.